Jake stared at the red notification blinking on his tablet screen. The words seemed to burn into his eyes. Employment terminated, effective immediately. His hands shook slightly as he read it again, hoping somehow the message would change. 28 years old, and now he had nothing. The space station's automated systems had decided his job fixing air processors wasn't needed anymore. New robots could do everything faster and cheaper. They didn't need sleep, didn't need food, and definitely didn't need a paycheck. He closed the tablet and looked around his tiny room. Everything he owned could fit in 2 bags. The walls were gray metal, cold and unwelcoming. A small window showed the stars beyond, beautiful but distant, just like his dreams of a better life. Jake checked his credit balance one more time. 847 credits. That was it. His entire fortune. Maybe enough for 2 weeks of basic food if he was careful. The thought made his stomach clench with worry. He needed to find work, fast. But who would hire him when machines could do his job better? Jake had heard other workers talking in whispers about the same thing happening to them. The station was changing, becoming more automated every day. Humans were becoming unnecessary. Walking through the corridors felt different now. Everything looked the same, but Jake felt like an outsider. The familiar hum of the station's engines seemed to mock him. These machines would keep running long after he was gone. The marketplace buzzed with activity. Aliens from dozens of different worlds traded goods and services. The air smelled of exotic spices and strange foods. Normally, Jake enjoyed watching the colorful crowd. Today, it just reminded him how small and unimportant he was. He was looking for cheap food when he noticed her. She sat hunched against a wall in the quieter section of the market. Her skin had a silvery blue color that seemed to shimmer, but dimly, like a light running out of power. Jake had seen her kind before, the Veltari. They were known for the beautiful patterns of light that danced across their skin, but this one barely glowed at all. She was shivering. Jake stopped walking. The area she sat in was set up for the Krillian traders who liked it cold. Most other species avoided this section because of the temperature, but she had nowhere else to go. He watched her for a moment, unsure what to do. She looked so alone, so lost. Her large eyes stared at nothing, and her thin frame shook with each breath of the cold air. "Hey," Jake said to a nearby food vendor, an old Terran who'd been running his stall for years. "How long has she been there?" The vendor glanced over. 3 days now. Poor thing. Her mate died in the asteroid mines last week. Mining accident. She's got no family here, no money, nothing. Jake felt his heart sink. What happens to her people when they get too cold? Veltari? They can die from it. Their whole body runs on those light patterns you see. When they get too cold, the lights go out. Permanently. The vendor shook his head sadly. Shame, really. She seems like a nice kid. Jake looked back at her. As he watched, her glow flickered and dimmed even more. She was dying. Slowly but surely. Without thinking, he started walking toward the shops that sold survival gear. His mind was made up before he could talk himself out of it. The thermal blanket cost 850 credits. Jake stared at the price tag, his mouth dry. It was more than he had, more than everything he owned. "Please," he said to the shopkeeper, a gruff Centauran with 4 arms, "I only have 847. And this." He pulled out his personal heating unit, the one thing keeping his own room comfortable. The shopkeeper studied him with all 4 eyes. "Why do you want it?" "There's a Veltari woman out there who's freezing to death. She needs it more than I do." For a long moment, the shopkeeper said nothing. Then he took the heating unit and examined it. "This is worth maybe 3 credits, but..." He looked toward where the woman sat. "Fine. Take the blanket. Sometimes doing the right thing is worth more than credits." Jake's hands were shaking as he carried the blanket toward her. He'd never spoken to a Veltari before. What if she didn't trust him? What if she thought he wanted something from her? He approached slowly, like he might approach a frightened animal. She looked up at him with those large, dark eyes. Up close, he could see how beautiful she was, even dimmed by cold and grief. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal. Excuse me, Jake said softly. He tried to remember the few Veltari words he'd heard in the station announcements. Veltan? It meant peace or safety, he thought. Her eyes widened with surprise. She understood. Jake held out the blanket. You're cold. This will help. She stared at the blanket, then at him. When she spoke, her voice was musical but weak. Why? She asked in broken galactic common. Because... Jake struggled to find the right words. Because everyone deserves to be warm. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took the blanket. The moment. It touched her skin. Her light patterns began to pulse brighter. Not much, but enough to see the difference. She wrapped it around herself and closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 days, she looked peaceful. Thank you, she whispered. Jake nodded and started to walk away. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable by staying too long. Wait, she called after him. He turned back. What is your name? Jake. I am Lyra. She touched her hand to her heart, then extended it toward him. A Veltari greeting he'd seen before. You have saved my life, Jake. As he walked back to his empty room, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was something close. Purpose, maybe. Or hope. He had no job, no money, and no idea what tomorrow would bring. But he'd done something good today. He'd saved a life. The stars outside his window looked a little brighter as he settled down for what might be his last night in these quarters. Somewhere in the marketplace, Lyra was warm and safe. That was worth more than 850 credits. It was worth everything. Jake woke up to pounding on his door. His heart raced as he checked the time. 6 in the morning. Nothing good ever happened this early. Open up! Station security! The voice was cold and official. Jake stumbled to the door, still half asleep. 2 security officers stood in the hallway, their faces stern. Behind them was his landlord, a thin man with calculating eyes. Jake Henderson? The first officer asked. Yeah, that's me. You have 48 hours to vacate these quarters. Failure. To pay rent means immediate eviction. Jake's stomach dropped. He'd been hoping for at least a week to find work. Can't you give me more time? I'm looking for a job. 48 hours, the landlord interrupted. Rules are rules. Should have thought about that before you threw away your money on some alien. The officers left, but the landlord lingered. Heard what you did yesterday. Real stupid if you ask me. Now look where it got you. After they were gone, Jake sat on his narrow bed and put his head in his hands. 2 days. He had 2 days to find a miracle. The station's job center was crowded with other humans, all looking desperate. Jake waited in line for 3 hours just to talk to a counselor. Maintenance work? The counselor shook her head. Sorry, everything's automated now. What about cleaning? I'll take anything. There's a waiting list, 15 people ahead of you. She barely looked up from her screen. Next! Jake spent the rest of the day walking from shop to shop. The same answer everywhere. Not hiring. Some people were nicer about it than others, but the result was always the same. As evening came, he found himself back in the marketplace. His feet had carried him there without thinking. He looked toward the spot where he'd found Lyra yesterday. She wasn't there. For a moment, panic seized him. What if something had happened to her? What if the blanket hadn't been enough? Looking for someone? Jake spun around. Lyra stood behind him, the thermal blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a shawl. Her light patterns were brighter now, pulsing with gentle gold and blue colors. She looked healthier, more alive. I was just... Jake didn't know what to say. How are you feeling? Better, much better. She stepped closer. I have been looking for you. For me? Why? Lyra's lights flickered with what Jake was learning might be embarrassment. I heard what happened. About your job. About your home. Her voice grew soft. You spent everything to help me. Jake shrugged, trying to act like it didn't matter. It's fine. I'll figure something out. No. Her lights pulsed brighter, more urgent. It is not fine. You saved my life, and now you suffer because of it. This is not right. They walked together through the quieter sections of the station. Lyra moved with a strange grace, almost like she was floating. Her light patterns shifted constantly, showing emotions Jake couldn't read yet. Tell me about your work, she said. What did you do? Fixed air processors. Made sure everyone could breathe clean air. Not very exciting. But important, Lyra said firmly. On my home world, we have specialists who manage our atmosphere. They are highly respected. Jake had never thought of his job that way. Well, the machines do it better now. Machines break, Lyra said, and they do not understand the needs of different species like you do. They found themselves in the food distribution center, where the station's poorest residents came for free meals. Jake got in line, trying not to feel ashamed. Lyra waited with him, her presence somehow making the whole situation less humiliating. I may have an idea, she said as they sat with their simple meal. But first I must tell you something about myself. She explained that before coming to the station, she had worked in bio-environmental systems on her homeworld. The Veltari were experts at managing complex atmospheric needs for multiple species. Our planet hosts many different races, she said. Each needs different air, different temperatures, different humidity. We learn to create perfect environments for everyone. Jake listened, fascinated. He'd never known that about the Veltari. When my mate died, Lyra continued, her lights dimming slightly, I lost my legal right to work here. Without his visa, I am nobody. But I still have my knowledge. What are you thinking? The station has problems with its air systems in the new sections. I have heard people complaining the atmosphere is wrong for many species. Her lights began to pulse with excitement. You have the technical background. I have the biological knowledge. Together, we could solve these problems. Jake felt a spark of hope. But you can't work legally without a sponsor. Exactly. I need someone with proper credentials to submit proposals with me, someone the station authorities would trust. She looked at him meaningfully. It was crazy. Jake barely knew her. He had no money to start a business, and she was legally in a difficult position. But something about the idea felt right. Where would we even begin? Lyra's entire body lit up with brilliant gold patterns. I have been studying the station's public environmental reports. There are 17 critical issues that could be solved with proper bioatmospheric management. Over the next hour, she outlined problems Jake hadn't even noticed. Air that was too dry for amphibious species in Section C. Oxygen levels that were wrong for the Altarian traders. Carbon dioxide buildup in the lower levels that was making everyone sluggish. You really think we could fix all this? I know we could. But Jake... Her lights dimmed with worry. This would mean working together closely. Some people would not approve. Humans and Veltari in business together. Some would call it strange. Jake had already noticed the looks they got walking through the station together. Some humans stared with disapproval. Some aliens seemed suspicious of their friendship. Let them talk, Jake said. If we can help people breathe better, what does it matter what species we are? That night, Jake lay in his bed knowing it might be his last night there. But for the first time since losing his job, he felt hopeful. Lyra had given him something more valuable than credits. She'd given him a purpose. Tomorrow, they would start working on their proposal. They would face the station bureaucracy together. And maybe, just maybe, they would prove that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unlikely partnerships. Outside his window, the stars seemed brighter. Somewhere in the cargo bay where Lyra was sleeping, he hoped she was warm and safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them together. Jake carried his 2 bags through the station's lower levels, feeling like everyone was watching him. His eviction notice had become station gossip. Some people whispered as he passed. Others just stared. He found Lyra waiting by Cargo Bay 17, just like they'd planned. She looked nervous, her light patterns flickering between blue and green, colors he was starting to recognize as worry. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, looking at the heavy metal door. "It is not much," Lyra said, softly. "But it is warm and it is safe." She opened the door to reveal a small space carved out between shipping containers. Someone had set up basic living supplies, a few blankets, some water containers, a small heating unit that hummed quietly in the corner. It was tiny, barely, big enough for 1 person, let alone 2. "Lyra, I can't take your space. You were here first." Her lights pulsed with something that might have been amusement. "Jake, you gave me everything to keep me warm. The least I can do is share that warmth with you." Living together was awkward at first. Jake tried to give Lyra privacy, turning away when she adjusted her light patterns or rested. But the space was so small that privacy was almost impossible. He learned things about the Veltari he'd never known. They needed less sleep than humans, but they had to rest their light patterns regularly or they'd burn out. Lyra would sit quietly for an hour each evening, her skin completely dark, recharging. "Does it hurt?" Jake asked one night. "No," Lyra said. "It feels peaceful. Like your human meditation, perhaps." Jake also discovered that Veltari ran warmer than humans. Much warmer. After weeks of sleeping in cold quarters, the cozy warmth of their shared space felt like luxury. During the day, they worked on their proposal. Lyra had an amazing understanding of atmospheric science. She could explain complex biological needs in simple terms that Jake could understand and translate into technical language. "The Centauran traders in Section B," Lyra explained, drawing diagrams on a borrowed tablet. "They need higher humidity, but the current system creates condensation problems. If we adjust the airflow patterns and add mineral filters here and here, we solve both issues." Jake was impressed by her knowledge. "How do you know all this?" "My people have been managing multi-species environments for centuries. It is not just science to us. It is art." Their first breakthrough came when they approached Dr. Chen, the station's chief science officer. She was a stern woman who didn't smile much, but she listened carefully to their presentation. "Interesting," Dr. Chen said, studying their proposal. "We've been having problems in exactly these areas. But why should I trust an unemployed maintenance worker and a Veltari with no legal work status?" Jake felt his heart sink, but Lyra stepped forward. Her light patterns shifted to a steady, confident gold. "Because we understand what the machines cannot," Lyra said. "Machines see numbers. We see living beings who need to breathe, to be comfortable, to feel at home." Dr. Chen looked at them for a long moment. "I'll give you a trial run. 1 section. If you can solve the air quality issues in Section C within a week, we'll talk about a real contract." That night, Jake and Lyra celebrated with food packets from the distribution center. It wasn't much, but it felt like a feast. "We did it," Jake said. "We actually got a chance." Lyra's patterns danced with joy. "This is only the beginning." Working in Section C was harder than either of them expected. The atmospheric processors were old and cranky. The air felt thick and stale, making everyone sluggish. Several alien species had complained of breathing problems. Jake crawled through maintenance tunnels while Lyra analyzed air samples. They worked 12-hour days, barely stopping to eat. "The problem is here," Lyra said, pointing to readings on their borrowed equipment. "The filtration system is removing too much oxygen while trying to filter out carbon dioxide. The balance is wrong. Can we fix it without shutting down the whole section?" "I think so, but it will require very precise adjustments." They worked through the night, Jake making tiny adjustments to the machinery while Lyra monitored the atmospheric changes. It was delicate work. One mistake could make the air unbreathable. As dawn approached, they ran the final test. The air felt different immediately, cleaner, fresher. Jake took a deep breath and felt more alert than he had in days. "It works," he said, hardly believing it. Lyra's entire body lit up with brilliant gold patterns. In the dim maintenance tunnel, she looked like a living constellation. The residents of Section C noticed the change within hours. Shop owners reported feeling more energetic. The Altarian merchants said they could finally breathe comfortably. Even the cranky Krillian traders admitted the air felt better. Dr. Chen was impressed. "How did you solve it so quickly when our automated systems couldn't?" "The machines were trying to treat all species the same," Lyra explained. "But different beings have different needs. We created a system that adapts to who is in each area at any given time." That evening, Jake and Lyra returned to their cargo bay home exhausted but victorious. They had proven themselves. More importantly, they had proven that their partnership worked. As they settled down to rest, Jake noticed something. Lyra's light patterns had changed. Instead of the random colors he'd grown used to, they were pulsing in a steady rhythm. It reminded him of a heartbeat. "Lyra," he said carefully, "your lights, they're different." She looked down at herself, and her patterns flickered with what Jake now knew was embarrassment. "It happens sometimes," she said quietly. "When Veltari spend much time with someone we care about, our patterns begin to match their rhythms." Jake felt his own heart beat faster. "What does that mean?" "It means," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that you have become very important to me." In the warm glow of her patterns, Jake realized that somewhere between helping a freezing stranger and building a business together, something beautiful had grown between them. Something that had nothing to do with credits or contracts, and everything to do with two lonely souls finding warmth in each other. Outside the cargo bay, the station hummed with life. Inside, two beings from different worlds were discovering that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or money, it was connection. Dr. Chen called them to her office 3 days after their success in Section C. Jake felt nervous as they walked through the station's upper levels. These areas were cleaner, brighter, places where important decisions were made. "Sit," Dr. Chen said, gesturing to chairs across from her desk. She looked serious, but not angry. "Your work in Section C has been remarkable. Air quality improved by 40%. Productivity is up. Even the complaints have stopped." Jake and Lyra exchanged glances. This sounded like good news, but Dr. Chen's tone suggested there was more coming. "I have an offer for you," she continued, "but it's not what you might expect." She activated a holographic display showing a map of the outer mining stations. Red warning lights blinked at several locations. "These are our furthest mining operations. They're having critical life support failures. The automated systems can't handle the unique atmospheric challenges of deep space mining. We need specialists to go out there and fix the problems manually." Jake stared at the map. Those stations were weeks away from any help. If something went wrong, the pay would be substantial, Dr. Chen added. "Enough to set you up for life. But I won't lie to you. It's dangerous work. And not everyone out there will be happy to see an interspecies team." Lyra's light patterns shifted to deep blue. The color Jake had learned meant she was thinking hard. "How long would we be gone?" Jake asked. 6 months minimum. Maybe longer depending on how many stations need help. After they left Dr. Chen's office, Jake and Lyra walked in silence through the marketplace. The familiar sounds and smells felt different now, knowing they might leave all this behind. "What do you think?" Jake finally asked. "I think," Lyra said slowly, "that this could change everything for us, but I also think it could be very difficult." They sat on a bench overlooking the station's main viewport. Stars stretched endlessly, in all directions, beautiful but cold. "Those mining stations," Lyra continued, "they will not be like here. The people there, they may not understand why a human and a Veltari work together." Jake knew she was right. Even on this relatively diverse station, they got strange looks. Out in the isolated mining operations where people worked dangerous jobs and tensions ran high, their partnership might seem suspicious or wrong. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Lyra's patterns flickered. "Yes, but not of the work. I am afraid of what people might say to you because of me, Lyra." Jake turned to face her. "I don't care what anyone says. We're good at this. We help people. That's what matters." 3 days later, they boarded a transport ship bound for the Kepler Mining Collective. Their first destination was Station Omega-7, where life support systems were failing so badly that workers were getting sick. The journey took 2 weeks. Jake had never been in space for so long. The endless black made him feel small and isolated. Lyra seemed to handle it better. Her people were used to long journeys between stars. Station Omega-7 looked like a piece of metal held together with hope and prayer. It spun slowly against the backdrop of an asteroid field, where massive mining. Ships carved chunks of rock into manageable pieces. The station commander, a gruff man named Rodriguez, met them at the docking bay. His expression wasn't welcoming. "So, you're the specialists," he said, looking Jake and Lyra up and down. "Got to say, I was expecting something different." "We're here to fix your air problems," Jake said simply. "Right. Well, I hope you know what you're doing. We've got 300 workers here, and half of them are complaining they can't breathe properly." The station's atmosphere was a mess. Jake could feel it the moment they stepped inside. The air was thick, stale, and had a metallic taste that made his throat burn. "This is worse than I expected," Lyra said quietly, her light patterns dim with concern. They set up their equipment in a storage room that doubled as their temporary lab. The work was harder than anything they'd done before. The station's life support systems were old, patched together with parts from a dozen different manufacturers. "Look at this," Jake said, studying the atmospheric readings. "Carbon dioxide levels are 3 times normal. Oxygen is low, and there's some kind of chemical contamination from the mining operations. The filtration system is completely overwhelmed," Lyra added. "It cannot handle the specific needs of this many different species in such a small space." They worked 18-hour days, crawling through maintenance shafts and analyzing air samples. The station's crew watched them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Some of the workers were openly hostile. Jake overheard conversations in the mess hall. People questioning why a human would work with an alien, wondering if they could be trusted. "Maybe the aliens got some kind of control over him," one miner said loudly enough for Jake to hear. "Or maybe he's one of those humans who thinks aliens are better than his own kind," another replied. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but Lyra touched his arm gently. "Let them talk," she said. "Our work will speak louder than their words." The breakthrough came during their second week. Jake was deep in the station's core, adjusting filtration settings, when the entire system suddenly shut down. Emergency alarms blared. Red lights flashed. In the mining stations, losing life support wasn't just uncomfortable. It could be deadly. Within hours. "Jake!" Lyra's voice crackled through his communicator. "The main processor has failed. We have maybe 6 hours of reserve air." Jake's heart pounded as he worked frantically to bypass the failed systems. His hands shook as he rewired connections and rerouted power. One mistake could kill everyone on the station. Lyra guided him through the technical adjustments while monitoring air quality throughout the station. Her knowledge of atmospheric science was the only thing standing between 300 people and suffocation. "Oxygen levels in Section A are dropping," she reported. "You need to increase flow to that area." "Working on it," Jake replied, sweat dripping into his eyes. 4 hours later, they had the system running again. Not perfectly, but well enough to keep everyone alive while they made permanent repairs. The station's crew looked at them differently after that. The whispers and suspicious looks mostly stopped. Commander Rodriguez even smiled when he saw them. "You two saved a lot of lives today," he said. "I owe you an apology and a debt." By the time they finished their work at Omega 7, the station's air quality was better than it had been in years. Workers reported feeling more energetic. Productivity increased. Even the food tasted better when people could breathe properly. As their transport ship carried them toward their next assignment, Jake and Lyra sat together in the observation deck, watching the stars. "We did good work," Jake said. "Yes," Lyra agreed. Her light patterns pulsed with satisfaction. "But more than that, we proved something important." "What's that?" "That working together makes us both stronger. When that emergency happened, I could not have fixed it alone. Neither could you. But together." Her patterns shifted to warm gold. "Together we saved everyone." Jake realized she was right. Individually, they were just two people with some useful skills. Together, they were something more powerful, a team that could solve problems neither could handle alone. Outside the viewport, space stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there were more stations, more people who needed help, more challenges that would test their partnership. But Jake wasn't worried anymore. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months later, Jake and Lyra returned to their home station as heroes. Word of their success had spread throughout the mining collective. They had fixed life support systems on 12 different stations, saved countless lives, and earned more credits than Jake had ever imagined possible. Dr. Chen met them at the docking bay with a smile, the first genuine smile Jake had ever seen from her. "Welcome back," she said. "I trust you've heard that your services are in high demand. I have requests from mining operations in 3 different sectors." Jake looked at their pile of equipment and personal belongings. After months of cramped transport ships and temporary quarters, the thought of returning to their cargo bay home felt strange. "Actually," Jake said, "I think we need a break first." They had enough credits now to afford proper quarters, separate ones if they wanted. But as they stood in the housing office, neither of them seemed eager to live apart. "2 bedrooms?" the clerk asked. Jake and Lyra looked at each other. "1 is fine," Lyra said softly. Their new quarters were in a better section of the station, with a real window that showed the stars and actual furniture instead of supply crates. It felt luxurious after months of making do with whatever they could find, but luxury couldn't solve everything. That first week back, Jake noticed other Veltari approaching Lyra in the marketplace. They would speak to her in their musical language, their light patterns flashing in rapid, complex sequences. Lyra always looked uncomfortable during these conversations. "What do they want?" Jake asked after watching another such encounter. Lyra's patterns dimmed. "They say I have been away from my people too long, that I am forgetting who I am." "What do you mean?" "In Veltari culture, widows are supposed to mourn for 1 full cycle, about 14 months of your time. After that, they should seek a new mate within their own species." She looked down at her hands. "I have been living with you, working with you, depending on you. They think I am dishonoring my late mate's memory." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What do you think?" "I think," Lyra said carefully, "that my late mate would want me to be happy." and I have been happier these past months than I ever thought possible after losing him." They were sitting on their small couch, close enough that Jake could feel the gentle warmth Lyra's body naturally radiated. Her light patterns were shifting between colors he'd learned to read: uncertainty, sadness, but also something warmer. "Lyra," Jake said, his heart pounding. "These past months, working together, living together, it's been the best time of my life." Her patterns stilled, waiting. "I know we're different species. I know people think it's strange, but He took a deep breath. "I love you." For a moment, Lyra's entire body went dark. Jake's heart sank. Had he said the wrong thing? Then light exploded across her skin in the most beautiful display Jake had ever seen. Gold and silver patterns danced from her fingertips to her shoulders, pulsing in rhythms that seemed to match his heartbeat. "In my culture," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "this is how we show the deepest love. I have been fighting to control it for weeks, afraid you would think it strange." "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Jake whispered. The next few weeks were both wonderful and challenging. Word spread quickly that the human Veltari team had become something more than business partners. Reactions were mixed. Some people were supportive. Dr. Chen actually seemed pleased when she heard the news. "Good," she said simply. "You work well together. Now you'll work even better." But others were less accepting. Jake overheard human workers making crude jokes about alien lovers. Some Veltari refused to acknowledge Lyra when they passed her in the corridors. The worst incident happened in the marketplace. Jake was buying supplies when he heard shouting. He rushed toward the sound and found Lyra surrounded by 3 human men, their faces twisted with anger. "Freak," one of them was saying. "Taking jobs from real humans, corrupting our people with your alien tricks." "She's not corrupting anyone," Jake said, stepping between them and Lyra. "Oh, look, here's the traitor himself," another man sneered. "Tell me, what's it like sleeping with a glowworm?" Jake's hands clenched into fists, but Lyra touched his arm gently. "They are not worth it," she said quietly. The men eventually wandered off, but the encounter left both Jake and Lyra shaken. "Maybe they're right," Lyra said that evening. "Maybe this is too difficult. Too strange." "Hey," Jake said, taking her hands. "Look at me." Her light patterns were dim, almost gray with sadness. "Do you remember Station Omega-7? He asked. "When the life support failed?" She nodded. "We saved 300 lives that day. Not because we were human or Veltari, but because we worked together. Because we cared about each other and about helping people." He squeezed her hands gently. "That's what matters, not what some angry people think." Slowly, her patterns began to brighten. The turning point came when they received an unexpected visitor. Commander Rodriguez from Station Omega-7 had traveled all the way to their station, bringing with him a delegation of workers. "We wanted to thank you both in person," he said in the station's main conference room. "What you did for us, it changed everything. Our productivity is up, our health problems are down, and morale is the best it's been in years." He looked around the room at the gathered crowd, station officials, workers, even some of the people who had been critical of Jake and Lyra's relationship. "I don't care what species you are or who you love," Rodriguez continued. "I care that you saved my people's lives, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." The room erupted in applause. Jake saw tears in Lyra's eyes as her patterns blazed with joy and pride. That night, they walked to the station's observation deck, the same place where they'd sat months ago, uncertain about their future. "I've been thinking," Jake said, looking out at the stars, "about what we do next. And I want to make this official, not just the business, us." He turned to face her. "I know we can't get married in the traditional human sense, and I don't know much about Veltari bonding ceremonies, But Lyra's entire body lit up like a constellation. "Yes," she said before he could finish. "Whatever form it takes, yes." Dr. Chen helped them research interspecies bonding laws. It turned out that while uncommon, such unions were legally recognized throughout the galactic community. The ceremony could incorporate traditions from both cultures. The bonding took place a month later in the station's largest observation lounge. Jake wore his best clothes, simple but formal. Lyra had woven patterns of light into her skin that told the story of their meeting, their partnership, and their love. The ceremony was attended by beings from a dozen different species. Commander Rodriguez was there, along with workers from several of the stations they'd helped. Even some of the Veltari who had initially disapproved came to witness the bonding. As they exchanged vows, Jake speaking in halting Veltari, Lyra responding in careful galactic common. Her light patterns synchronized perfectly with his heartbeat. According to Veltari tradition, this meant they were truly bonded, their lives intertwined at the deepest level. Months passed. Their business grew beyond anything they'd imagined. They established a foundation to help other refugees and displaced workers, regardless of species. Their success story inspired other interspecies partnerships throughout the sector. But the real success, Jake knew, wasn't measured in credits or contracts. It was measured in quiet moments. Waking up each morning to Lyra's gentle glow, working together to solve impossible problems, falling asleep each night, knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures they'd face together. One evening, as they prepared for their next mission, a journey to help establish new atmospheric systems in the outer colonies, Jake found himself thinking about that day so long ago when he'd spent his last credits on a blanket for a freezing stranger. "No regrets?" Lyra asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. Jake looked at her, his partner, his love, his best friend, as her patterns pulsed with warmth and contentment. "None at all," he said. "Best investment I ever made." Outside their window, the stars stretched endlessly, full of possibilities and new worlds to explore. Together, they were ready for all of it.